Hi, this is Teri from stampinmagic.com. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is this double slider card. It uses some of our animal expedition paper and also the coordinating animal outing stamp set. When you pull the ribbon on the bottom section, both panels pop out and you've got room on the bottom panel to write your message. It's such a fun style of card to create and to receive, so I hope you stay with me to see how it's done. I will be giving measurements as we go, but you will find both the metric and imperial measurements in the corresponding blog post on my blog, and there'll be a link to this in the description below. So let's get started. I'm starting with a piece of cardstock that's 5.5 inches wide. Now this is A4 in length, which is almost 11 3/4 of an inch. So if you're in the US, you're going to have to cut down a 12-inch piece. You need at least 11.5 inches long. Now I'm going to score this at 3 5/8, 7 3/8, and 11 1/8. Your cardstock should now have 4 sections. These 2 sections will be exactly the same width, but the first section will be slightly smaller and the end section will just be a narrow band. This is where you're going to put your glue later. Now if you cut your cardstock to 11.5 inches long, obviously this narrow band will be slightly smaller than the one you see here. So I'm just folding on all the scored lines and I'm reinforcing those folds with my bone folder. We can now add the adhesive, and I'm using Teri tape for this, and you want this on that narrow section as close to the fold line as you can get it. This goes on the outside of your base card, not the inside. We're now going to create the mechanism that will enable the panels to pop out above and below. We want to punch out some small sections using the classic label punch, and this is where our strip of plastic will sit, and it will guide those panels up and down. This is a strip of plastic that I'm going to use. Now it's approximately 1 3/4 inches wide and it's about 12 inches long, and I cut this from one of these A4 pockets. I just cut down the side and along the base and then cut off the strip that I needed. If you haven't got the classic label punch, then you could just hand cut some slots out of the card on the top and the bottom. These just need to be slightly longer than the width of your plastic and about 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 of an inch deep. Now what I'm doing here using the punch, I'm just punching into the card using half the depth of the punch. It's easy to line up this punch because it's got points at each end, so I'm just aligning those as best I can with the edges of the cardstock. You also want to ensure that you punch in the centre of each edge on that panel. Next, wrap the strip of plastic around that first panel, making sure that it sits in the punched out sections. I'm going to use Teri tape again to secure this, and I'm just pulling off a small piece and adding it to the bottom of that top section, and also another piece on the bottom section. Then you can remove the backing and pull the 2 ends towards each other. Now they will overlap. You want to pull it tight initially but then loosen it a bit. You don't want this really tight. You want your panels to be able to move freely. So just give it a little bit of slack. Position the join in the plastic strip towards the top of the panel. Now using a circle punch, I'm using the 1-inch circle. You want to punch a half circle at the bottom of that middle panel. So I'm just working out where the centre is here, and then I'll punch it out. I'm going to start decorating the front of the card first, and I have 2 layers here. The shaded spruce cardstock measures 13.5 centimetres by 9 centimetres, and the Animal Expedition paper measures 13 centimetres by 8.5 centimetres. Now the imperial measurements will be in my corresponding blog post, which is on my blog, and you'll find a direct link to this in the description below. Layer these 2 pieces together and then add them to the front of the card, which is the middle section. Again, use the 1-inch circle punch and the half circle you've already punched as a guide to punch through the layers that you've just added. I have 2 more layers for the front of the card. Now the shaded spruce layer measures 13.5 centimetres by 5 centimetres, and the white layer measures 13 centimetres by 4.5 centimetres. And I've embossed the white layer using the subtle embossing folder. Now I did make a mistake here. I used thick Whisper White card instead of our normal white card, and you'll see why that's a problem a bit later on. So layer these 2 pieces together and then add them to the front of the card. Now this is where I realised my mistake. Again, we want to use the 1-inch circle punch to punch out that half circle, but because I've used the thick Whisper White, it's just that tiny little bit too thick, and I really struggled to get the punch in. So this would have been a lot easier if I'd have used the thinner, the normal weight Whisper White card. I got there eventually, but it was a struggle. Now we've just got a tiny bit of stamping for this card, and I'm using the shaded spruce ink and a sentiment from the Animal Outing stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that onto a scrap piece of our normal weight Whisper White card. Then I'm going to use one of the Stitched Shapes framelets, the second size up, to cut that out. Now I could have stamped all the animals and coloured them and then cut them out using the Animal Friends thinlets, but for this project I decided to cut all the animals out from the Animal Expedition Designer Series paper. So there are 2 sheets in there that match the framelets. You can actually get most of the animals out of this first sheet. So the kangaroo with the little koala in its pouch, the rhinoceros and the giraffe. The only framelit that doesn't fit an image on this sheet is the little frog that sat on the branch. The leaves match, but the branch is too long for the framelit. So for this image I used the second sheet, and one of the images on there matched perfectly. We need 3 layers for each of the panels. This is normal Whisper White cardstock, and this layer measures 13 centimetres by 7.5 centimetres. And I'm going to use the shaded spruce ink to stamp a sentiment from the Happy Birthday Gorgeous stamp set right at the top of this panel. And this will be our top panel. This white mat can now be added to the shaded spruce layer. Now that measures 13.5 centimetres by 8 centimetres. And then that section can be added to the crumb cake mat, which measures 14 centimetres by 8.5 centimetres. Now we can start on the bottom panel. Now again, we've got the 3 different mats, all the same sizes as the top panel. You can add the Whisper White mat to the shaded spruce one straight away, because we're not doing any stamping on this one. Before the remaining layers can be put together, we need to secure the ribbon pull. So I'm just marking the center point at the bottom of that crumb cake layer first of all. And then I'm going to add strips of tear and tape and remove the backing. Make sure that your first layer of tape is raised up from the bottom edge slightly, otherwise when you add all the layers together your adhesive will be exposed still. Now I probably go completely overboard on the amount of tape I used here, but I just want to ensure that it's completely secure and there's no way that that ribbon will pull away from the card. Now I have some of our 1/8 of an inch black cord ribbon here, and I'm just determining how long I want to make that loop before I cut it off. I think I used approximately about 4.5 inches in the end, which is about 11.5 centimeters. So you just want to create the loop and then stick the free ends down onto that tear and tape. And then again more tear and tape strips, this time on top of the ribbon. Once you've removed all the backing, then you can glue those 2 sections together and then give it a good press down using a bone folder. Now we're going to secure the bottom panel first. So if you lay it onto the middle section of your card, and this is the inside of the base card, center it on that middle panel, making sure the top and bottom edges are aligned. And then we're going to use a small piece of tear and tape just to secure it in place. Now the join in your plastic should be towards the top, and you want to add your tear and tape to the top of the plastic and then remove the backing. Then all you need to do is hold it in place and close the card onto that bottom panel. Now to secure the top panel, so if you close your card as you had it before, and this time we're going to add a piece of tear and tape to the bottom of the plastic strip. Remove the backing and then position the top panel face down, again aligning the top and the bottom edges and also lining it up with the bottom panel underneath so everything is centered. Now finally we're going to stick that little side strip down, and that needs to go over the middle section of the card and it adheres to the front section of the card. Okay, so remove the backing on that strip. And then you can see the middle section. You want to tuck it over that and stick it to the front of the card, and the edges should meet. And once you've done that, just burnish it with the bone folder just to make sure it's all secure. Then you can test your card and make sure it's moving smoothly. Now I've already added some dimensionals onto the back of the sentiment panel, and I'm just working out here where I want my various elements to go. And once I'm happy, I can stick them down. I'm going to add the giraffe and the little frog on the branch, so they're flat on the card. So it's just the sentiment panel that's raised up. And finally we can add the other two images to the inside of the card. And these must be glued flat. If you position them with dimensionals, then they will catch when you try and open and close the card. So I'm going to place the kangaroo at the top, and then I'll add the rhinoceros down at the bottom. You've still got plenty of room on the bottom panel to write your message. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and press that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future projects. Bye for now.